My name is Jocelyn Parr. I am 28 years old. And on the night of my father's 60th birthday, I watched my family toast every person in the room, one, by name, and skip mine like it was a typo on the guest list. My mother raised her champagne glass and thanked my older brother Kyle for organizing the whole evening. She thanked my sister, Britt, for the decorations and the cake, which she had ordered from a bakery using my credit card, though no one at that table knew that except me. She thanked Kyle's wife, Megan, for helping with the seating chart. She even thanked the caterer by his first name. When she was done, she put her glass down, kissed my father on the cheek, and sat. I was sitting at the end of the table, closest to the kitchen, farthest from the centerpiece, between an empty chair and my brother's golf buddy who had been invited 3 days earlier. I waited. I thought maybe my father would say something when he stood. He did stand. He gave a short speech about legacy, about how proud he was to see his family carrying forward what he had built, about Kyle stepping up at the restaurant, about Britt being the heart of the family, about Megan fitting right in, like she had always been one of them. Then he looked around the table and said he was the luckiest man in Charleston. I was right there, 4 seats away, close enough to see the butter softening on his bread plate. And he looked right past me. The way you look past furniture, you have stopped noticing. After dinner, I found my mother in the hallway and asked her if anyone had planned to acknowledge me at all tonight. She sighed, the way she always sighed when I brought up something she considered unnecessary, and said, "Jocelyn, not everything has to be about you. Your father knows you were here. That should be enough. That should be enough." I turned that sentence over in my head the entire drive home. That should be enough. Sitting in a room full of people who share your blood and being treated like a seat filler at an award show, that should be enough. Watching your brother get praised for a business he nearly bankrupted and your sister get credited for a party she half planned with your money, that should be enough. Being visible only when the check comes and invisible the moment the glasses are raised, that should be enough. It was not enough. It had not been enough for a very long time. And that night, for the first time in years, I stopped pretending it was. Before I tell you what I did and what happened to every single one of them after, tell me something. What time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I want to see how far this one travels. Let me go back. The reason that birthday dinner cut the way it did was not because I needed applause. It was because I had spent the previous 4 years keeping my family's restaurant alive while they treated me like the help. My father, Gerald Parr, opened a seafood restaurant called Parr and Pine on King Street in Charleston in 2003. For 2 decades, it was a neighborhood institution, the kind of place where the hostess knew your anniversary and the bartender remembered your drink. My mother, Suzanne, ran the front of house for years and loved reminding people that hospitality was in her bones. My brother Kyle was supposed to take over operations after culinary school. My sister Britt handled social media and events. From the outside, it was a beautiful family story. Hard-working parents, devoted children, a legacy restaurant with soul. From the inside, it was a mess held together by my checking account. I was never part of the restaurant. I went to school for finance, worked at a commercial lending firm downtown, and built a career in exactly the kind of work my family found boring. My mother once introduced me at a church fundraiser as the one who does the number stuff. Kyle called me the spreadsheet sister. Britt said my job was basically being a human calculator, which was ironic coming from someone who once asked me why the restaurant's insurance premium went up after a kitchen fire. 4 years before that birthday, Kyle made a decision that nearly ended everything. He signed a lease on a second location in Mount Pleasant without telling my father, using the original restaurant as collateral. The concept was a fast casual seafood bar. The build-out went 60% over budget. The location opened 5 months late. By the time the doors closed 14 months later, it had burned through the restaurant's emergency reserves, maxed out a line of credit my father had personally guaranteed, and left Parr and Pine drowning in $340,000 of combined debt, with the landlord of the original King Street location threatening to terminate the lease over missed payments. My father called me on a Tuesday night, not to apologize for years of dismissing me, not to say he was proud of what I had built in my own career. He called because the bank had sent a notice, and for the first time in his life, he did not understand the words on the paper. I drove over. I read the documents. I sat in his office above the restaurant for 3 hours and realized the damage was worse than he knew. Kyle had also taken an equipment loan against assets that were technically leased, which created a default chain nobody had caught. The King Street landlord was already in conversations with a developer about converting the block. If my father lost his lease, the restaurant was gone, not struggling, gone. So I stepped in, not with advice. With money, I restructured their vendor debt using personal relationships I had built at the firm. I negotiated the lease renewal by guaranteeing 18 months of rent out of my own savings. I paid off the equipment loan directly, then set up a repayment schedule my father could actually survive. I brought in a forensic accountant I knew from work who untangled the Mount Pleasant disaster and salvaged what little remained. And when the King Street landlord still wavered, I did something I told myself was temporary. I bought the building. Not Par and Pine. The building. The whole thing. Through a holding entity I had set up 2 years earlier for investment properties. I purchased it using the last of a personal fund I had been growing since my mid-20s, combined with a small private loan I secured on my own credit. The landlord was happy to sell because the developer deal had stalled. I was happy to buy because it meant my father's restaurant could not be evicted on a whim. I told my father the building situation had been resolved. I did not tell him I was the one who resolved it by becoming his landlord. I kept the rent below market. I kept the terms flexible. I kept the whole thing quiet because I genuinely believed, back then, that protecting my family without needing credit was the generous thing to do. It was not generous. It was naive. Because what I actually did was give people who already undervalued me one more reason to believe I contributed nothing. For 4 years, I subsidized that restaurant. I covered 2 emergency repairs on the HVAC system. I waived rent increases when costs rose. I personally co-signed a new line of credit my father needed after a slow winter season because his own credit was still recovering from Kyle's disaster. I reviewed every quarterly financial statement, flagged problems before they became crises, and once caught a bookkeeping error that would have triggered an IRS audit. And every single holiday, every family dinner, every gathering, I was seated last, spoken to least, and left out of every toast, every photo caption, every public word of gratitude. Kyle got a new truck from my parents for his 32nd birthday. Britt got a trip to Italy. I got a text that said Happy B-Day. Love Mom 6 hours late, no punctuation, no follow-up. The birthday dinner was not the beginning. It was the end of my willingness to pretend the pattern was accidental. I did not sleep the night after my father's party. I sat at my dining table with a glass of water and a legal pad and wrote down everything I had put into that family over 4 years. Dollar amounts, dates, documents, guarantees. When I finished, the list was 4 pages long. Then I opened my laptop and pulled the title records, the lease agreement, the co-signed credit facility, and the trademark registration for Par and Pine, which my grandmother had transferred to me during the financial crisis because she told me once, very quietly, that she loved her son but did not trust him to protect the name. The next morning, I called my attorney. Not a family friend. Not someone who owed my father a favor. My attorney. A woman named Dana Whitfield, who had handled 2 of my property transactions, and once told me that the worst financial decisions she had ever seen were made by people who confused family loyalty with contractual obligation. I told her what I wanted. She asked me if I was sure. I told her I had never been more certain of anything. She said she would have everything ready by Friday. On Friday morning, a courier delivered a package to Par and Pine. It arrived at 7:45, 15 minutes before the kitchen staff usually started prep. My brother was the one who signed for it. He told me later, through his attorney, that he assumed it was a vendor delivery. Inside the outer packaging was a white gift bag, the same kind my family used for birthday presents, with tissue paper, and a small card tucked inside. The card read, "For the family. With love, Jocelyn." Beneath the tissue paper was a legal folder containing 3 documents. The first was a formal notice of lease termination, giving them 90 days to vacate the building. The second was a withdrawal of my personal guarantee on the restaurant's line of credit, effective immediately. The third was a cease and desist letter regarding unauthorized use of the Par and Pine trademark, which was registered in my name and had never been licensed to the business. Kyle called me 11 times before 9 a.m. My mother called 6. My father called once, hung up, then sent a text that said, "What have you done?" I replied with 4 words. "Read the full documents." Then I silenced my phone, made coffee, and sat by my window, watching the harbor while my family discovered what the past 4 years had actually looked like on paper. By noon, the chaos had spread. My mother called my aunt. Kyle called his wife. Britt posted a cryptic quote on Instagram about betrayal with a black background and white text, the kind of thing people post when they want sympathy without providing context. My father's attorney, a semi-retired man named George Hewitt, who had done the family's paperwork for 20 years, called Dana Whitfield and asked if this was a negotiating tactic. Dana said it was not. That evening, they showed up at my apartment. All 4 of them. My father stood at the front, hands in his jacket pockets, jaw tight. My mother stood behind him with her arms crossed and her reading glasses still on, which meant she had been staring at the documents all day. Kyle was pacing near the elevator. Britt leaned against the wall like she was already exhausted by a conversation that had not started yet. My father spoke first. He said there had clearly been a misunderstanding and that we needed to talk this through as a family. I asked him which part was the misunderstanding. The part where he forgot I existed at his own birthday dinner, or the part where he never realized I owned the building he worked in. He blinked. My mother stepped forward and said this was not the time for drama, that I was overreacting to a silly toast, that families are not perfect but you do not blow them up over a glass of champagne. I told her I was not blowing anything up. I was simply removing my financial support from people who had made it very clear they did not value my presence. If I was invisible, then my money should be invisible too. Kyle finally spoke. He said I had no right to pull the credit guarantee without warning, because the restaurant depended on it. I asked him if he had ever read the terms of that guarantee. He stared at me. I told him there was a 30-day written notice clause, which I had honored to the letter, and that if he had paid any attention to the financial structure of the business he claimed to run, he would have known that. Britt said I was jealous. That I had always been jealous because I was not part of the restaurant, not part of the family brand, not part of the story people loved. She said I wanted to matter so badly that I was willing to destroy what everyone else had built. I looked at her and asked a simple question. "Britt, how much is the monthly rent on the King Street building?" She did not know. I asked Kyle. He did not know either. I asked my father. He said it was handled, which was his way of saying he had never once looked at the number because it had always just appeared, like electricity or oxygen, the kind of thing you stop noticing when someone else is quietly paying for it. I told them the figure. I told them what market rate would have been. I told them the difference, multiplied across 4 years. The room got very quiet. My father said I was being vindictive. My mother said I was punishing them for not being affectionate enough. Britt said I was proving exactly why they had always kept me at a distance, because I made everything transactional. That word, transactional. I almost laughed. The people who had used me as their unpaid financial safety net for 4 years were calling me transactional because I had finally sent an invoice. Have you ever noticed that people who benefit from your silence are always the first to accuse you of being loud? They left that night without a resolution. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated in ways I had anticipated and ways I had not. My father retained a new attorney, a younger one, more aggressive, who sent over a counterclaim, arguing that my purchase of the building had been made under informal family agreement and that Par and Pine had acquired equitable rights through continuous operation and financial contribution. It was a creative argument. It was also wrong. Attached to the filing were 2 things that changed the nature of the dispute entirely. The first was a letter supposedly written by my father to me at the time of purchase, acknowledging a family arrangement for shared ownership. I had never seen this letter. It did not exist. The second was a bank statement annotated to suggest that my father had made partial payments toward the building purchase, payments that were actually routine rent deposits into my holding company's account, relabeled with handwritten notes in the margin. My attorney called me that evening and said one sentence that made me set my coffee down very slowly. They doctored the bank records. I was not surprised. I was tired. There is a specific kind of fatigue that comes from realizing your family will forge paperwork before they will simply say thank you. We responded within a week. Dana filed a motion for declaratory relief with full documentation, original title chain, wire transfers, loan origination records, the grandmother's trademark assignment, and a forensic analysis of the doctored bank statement that showed the margin notes had been added digitally, not by hand, using a font that did not match any of my father's known correspondence. The court date was set for 6 weeks later. In between, things fell apart in the way things do when the foundation was always rotten and someone finally kicks the beam. Kyle's wife, Megan, called me one afternoon and asked, very carefully, whether Kyle had told her the truth about the restaurant's finances. I told her the truth. She was silent for a long time and then said she needed to think. 2 weeks later, she moved back to her parents' house in Greenville. Britt lost a brand partnership with a local boutique hotel after they learned about the legal dispute. Her curated version of the Parr family story suddenly had footnotes. My mother stopped going to her book club. A woman there had apparently asked her, in front of everyone, whether it was true that her daughter owned the restaurant building. My mother told me later, through Kyle, that it was the most humiliating moment of her life. I found that interesting, not the years of ignoring me. Not the forged documents. The book club question. That was the line. The hearing was straightforward. My father's attorney attempted to present the letter and the annotated bank statements as evidence of an informal co-ownership arrangement. Dana methodically dismantled each one. The letter had metadata showing it was created 11 days after my legal notice was delivered. The bank annotations were digitally overlaid. My father was asked on the stand whether he had ever made a direct payment toward the purchase of the building. He said he believed his rent payments counted. The judge asked for any written agreement reflecting that belief. There was none. Kyle was asked whether he understood, at any point, that his sister personally guaranteed the credit line that kept the restaurant operational. He said he thought the bank had just approved it. The judge paused at that and asked my father the same question. My father looked at the table and said, "She offered. She offered." 2 words that carried the weight of everything wrong with my family. Not she saved us, not we owe her. She offered, as if I had volunteered to be invisible, as if generosity was the same thing as consent to be erased. The ruling confirmed my full ownership of the building. The lease termination was upheld. The trademark remained mine. The forged documents were referred for further review, and the judge noted in his order that the court takes a dim view of fabricated evidence in family disputes. We walked out into pale winter sunlight. My father tried to stop me on the courthouse steps. He said I had made my point and asked what it would take to fix this. I told him it would have taken one sentence at a birthday dinner. Just my name, in a toast, said out loud, like I was somebody who belonged in the room. That was all it would have cost. He had no answer. 90 days later, Parr and Pine closed its doors on King Street. My father attempted to relocate to a smaller space on the north side of town, but without the original location, the trademark or the line of credit, the new place never found its footing. It closed within 8 months. Kyle took a job managing someone else's restaurant in Somerville. He did not speak to me for over a year. When he finally did, it was a 3-line email that said he understood why I did what I did but that he was not ready to forgive me. I did not reply because forgiveness was never something I had asked him for. Britt rebuilt slowly. She started a small event planning business and, to her credit, stopped pretending online that our family was something it was not. We are not close. I do not think we will be. But she sent me a message on my birthday last year that just said, "I see you." 2 words. They were enough. My mother and I had coffee once, about 5 months after the hearing. She did not apologize. She said she wished things had gone differently. I told her they went exactly the way they were always going to go, once she decided that my presence should be enough and my contribution did not matter. She stirred her coffee for a long time and then said, "I did not know how much you were holding up." I believed her. That was the saddest part. My father sent me one letter, 3 months after the restaurant closed. It was short. He said I had destroyed something that took him 20 years to build. He said he hoped I understood the weight of what I had done. He said he could not figure out when I had become so cold. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it in a drawer. He still believed the coldness began with me, not with a man who could sit at a table surrounded by the people he loved, raise a glass, speak every name in the room except one, and call that an oversight. I sold the King Street building 6 months later to a hotel group out of Charlotte. The sale price was more than double what I had paid. I used part of the proceeds to start my own consulting firm, focused on small businesses with complicated family ownership structures. Turns out there is an entire industry of people drowning inside companies held together by guilt and silence. I understood every one of them. On the wall behind my desk, in a simple black frame, I hung the place card from my father's birthday dinner. The one from the empty chair beside mine. The chair they never assigned to anyone, because they never expected anyone important enough to sit there. Clients sometimes notice it and ask what it is. I tell them it is a reminder. Of what? Of what it costs to wait for people to say your name when they have already decided you do not have one. Do I regret what I did? No. I regret that it was necessary. I regret the years I spent believing that if I just gave a little more, covered a little more, stayed a little quieter, they would eventually turn around and see me standing there. They never did. Not because they could not, because seeing me would have meant admitting what I was holding, and that admission would have ruined the story they preferred, the one where they built everything themselves, and I was just the quiet one in the corner who did number stuff. I did not destroy my family. I stopped subsidizing a version of it that required my erasure to function. There is a difference, and it took me 28 years to learn it. And sometimes, on slow Sunday mornings, when the light hits the harbor just right, I think about that birthday dinner. My father raising his glass. My mother naming everyone. My brother smiling. My sister glowing. And me, at the end of the table, next to an empty chair, waiting for a name that never came. Then I think about the morning that courier package arrived at the restaurant. Kyle signing for it, assuming it was routine. The white gift bag with tissue paper. The card that said, "For the family. With love." The 11 missed calls. The silence I chose instead of answering. If this story has taught me one thing I would pass on, it is this. Being needed is not the same thing as being loved. Proximity does not equal belonging, and the people who forget your name when the glasses are raised will always remember it when the lights go out. They spent years telling me I was not part of the story. In the end, they were right. I was never part of their story. I was the author of my own. And for the first time in my life, every word in it is mine. If you are sitting somewhere right now, watching this, and something in your chest just tightened because you recognized a piece of yourself in what I said, I want you to hear one thing. Your silence is not a gift, it is a cost. And you are the only one paying it. Stop waiting for people to see what they have chosen not to look at. You deserve a room where your name is spoken first, not last, not never. If this story meant something to you, leave a like. If you have been through something like this, tell me in the comments. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is a good time. I will see you in the next one.